Let's go back to the Joint Committee. We did see a few months back when the Congress in the United States was investigating the Facebook issues, when they had the CEO of Facebook in the Parliament, the kind of questions that they were asking, the content and the depth that they had was on another level. We don't see that when our parliamentary committees are investigating these issues. What is the issue with that?
For Kenya, really, one of the biggest issues that we have is the politics surrounding efficiency and effectiveness. Because if we are going to have the kind of, and then the second bit of it probably is the manner in which we do our elections, the kind of people that we elect. You note that just before after the first election post promulgation of the Constitution 2013, the Constitution and the Elections Act set very high standards on who needs to be elected, how people are supposed to vie for office, including even a vetting process on who we elect. But you note that the same people that we're talking about in terms of our representatives in Parliament went out and decided to mutilate those laws that are then supposed to ensure that the right people are in office. Then the second thing is precedence. We haven't seen many of these committees come up with cases, rather deal with cases that are really in tandem with the expectations of the citizens. And if you were to ask me, we have more than 11 very grand mass corruption cases that have not been effectively dealt with, even by not just through Parliament, but even institutions like KCC, among others. Right. And so if we are going to have the kind of interrogation being done by this similar kind of people, then we need to really reflect on how effective are our institutions. And from where I sit and having engaged with this and from the readings that I have done from a governance perspective, Kenya really has more or less the best laws. We have the best institutions, but why we cannot be able to deal with these issues is the biggest question in my view. Right. So I think that His Excellency the President needs to come out as more or less the champion of this war on corruption, to be able to set the pace rolling. And in my view, look at what Lee Kuan Yew did, the late Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore. He set up, he more or less declared an amnesty for people whose names had been mentioned, people who had been met out there as suspects, and he said, we're giving you this number of days, declare what you have stolen, take it back to the people. And Kenya has a law on asset recovery and all these issues. All right. Why these laws cannot be able to protect the interests of the citizens? So the president can set up, these commissions and all these things, but if we do not have that political goodwill, which I think the president has come out very positively to be able to show Kenyans that he's willing to join in the war. So in my view, I think we need to borrow from what other countries have done, best practices, benchmark from them like Singapore. You mentioned the US. Let's look at what the Americans are doing to be able to deal with corruption, and then enhance in terms of strengthening our institutions like EACC. Because I believe that if we have a coordination mechanism within all these institutions, whether it's EACC, ODPP, DCI, we can be able to deal with corruption and then empower the citizens. What you're saying, that the buck stops at the highest office in the land. But precisely.
The president always says this country has all these bodies, the EACC, the DPP, so they should be empowered, that it doesn't need the strongman tactics.
And Ben, if you remember when we had the State House Summit on accountability, when the president was asking people, what do you want me to do? Mnataka nifanye nini? After that, there was a task force which was formed by the people that we are talking about. Yes. You know, there was it was chaired by the former Attorney General, Professor Githu Muigai. We had ODPP, we had DCI, Auditor General, we had Controller of Budget. And they came up with a very exciting report, which I have gone through. And the report sets out very clear challenges, the gaps, and how to deal with them in terms of filling them, and the recommendations that we need to do as a country. So I believe that this country has the best content in terms of what we need to do to deal with corruption. We just need to ensure that the institutions do what they have been set out to do, and that people, for example, EACC CEO or chair or whoever, that require protection. We have seen even officers investigating grand, massive corruption, losing their lives. These things should not be happening in this country, but they are happening because we have gaps, which many of these reports have already set out. So if we can be able to strengthen them, I am sure, and arrest people and charge them, we will not have.
All right, let's go back to the commission and let's bring in Mr. Omolo from Kisumu. Samolo, we have talked about the fact that there have been a lot of commissions of inquiry in this country, and the mood or the attitude of Kenyans is that these things, they don't work. In fact, there are butts of jokes saying that when something happens, Kenyans joke and say that a commission of inquiry will be formed, and then a lot of nothing will happen. What is the solution to making sure that that is not the case with the commissions of inquiry, because they are seen as having more depth, they will be able to cover more ground and more issues in terms of corruption? What is the way to ensure that they have credibility and the reports that they produce are acted upon?
Thank you so much, Ben. I think, allow me to take you back a bit. The first commission of inquiry that we have as a country that we can look back to was under the colonial regime in 1913. That is the Native Labor Commission that was investigating why Africans were not working for the Europeans in their plantations. And it found out the working conditions were not right. That report actually was factual, and somehow it addressed the issues then. Years later, we had the Maize Commission. We know how it ended poorly in 1966. Subsequent commissions have been the same way. Ouko Commission of Inquiry, the same person who formed it disbanded it when certain things started coming out. So the issue of goodwill from the very top is important, but most importantly, we need to take stock as a country. Where do we want to go? I want to posit that our hardware is very good as a country. Our software is rotten. And without the right software, even these commissions are not going to help us. You've talked about, or rather my colleague has talked about the forum that the president had at State House with the various commissions, and you heard him asking the Auditor General, don't investigate the source of Eurobond. Don't go to US. Those are reputable entities. What happened in the long run? We have a report that speaks to the opposite. So I think we must be very candid that if you want to address these concerns on matters to do with the corruption, especially in the sugar sector, there are those that the commission can do, but there are those that I want to posit here that you don't need a commission to get to certain basics. If 2015 we said sugar development levy should go out, we knew very well what that meant. We decided to disband Kenya Sugar Board. We formed AFA. We were slowly and tactfully bringing in importers of sugar into the picture. So clearly, we are investigating a problem we've created. Then you want to blame Parliament. Of course, Parliament is to blame. But look at it this way. When the executive and the legislature have no boundary, they speak from the same mouth, which means one can't check the other. So there is definitely going to be issues that were being talked about. You compared the US kind of investigative arms of parliament with the Kenyan. They can't compare because we have a parliament that is held hostage by the executive and vice versa. So I think a commission of inquiry that has a bit of teeth and goodwill from the president will be able to go to some extent. But I think we must ask ourselves, do we really need to go this direction as a country? What happened to us? What kind of leaders do we elect? Because that is where the problem begins. When you choose me because you think I have money in the pocket, I will have to find a way to bring back that money. When the big importers of sugar are able to influence the politics of the country, then it follows that when you eventually start investigating, you'll probably find that 50 or 60 MPs are beneficiaries of funds from the same importers. And now that the major scam around this sugar began just before our election last year, what does that tell you? It tells you that that money that came through the sugar importers probably is already in the pockets of most of these members of parliament. So it is very difficult for them now to come out and tell you authoritatively, these are the people who have been bringing in this illicit stuff. But a bit of statistics is also important, Ben. If as a country we consume 800,000 tons of sugar, we produce on average, the maximum we've done is 632, or rather 638,000. We must then continuously import 200,000 every year. Now, in the year 2017-18 to date, I think we've imported more than 400,000 tons. Now, that is more or less more than what we produce. questions are now arising. Should we continue with this kind of approach as a government in terms of how we treat the sugar sector? So even before we talk about a judicial commission or inquiry about issues of importation, can we ask the government a candid question? Have you been fair to the farmer? The 6 million people who depend on the sugar sector? If you've not, then let's ask ourselves, if we want to match up to commercial countries that are doing it cheaper, how do we then ensure that we make our environment competitive? That requires that for the sugar farmer, you need to give them the incentives, but more importantly, we need to deal with the inefficiency within the sugar factories.
It's a much
settling
wider,
fact is that
it's a much wider discussion, as you're saying.
It's a much wider,
discussion. But let's go back as we wind up. Let's go back to where this all started. Kevin, at the end of the day, whether Judicial Commission of Inquiry or not, Kenyans elected members of parliament whose mandate, one of them key roles is oversight.
Sure.
At the end of the day, they should be answerable to Kenyans. So how do we deal with this issue that they are always corrupted, or they are not good enough to be able to ask the hard questions and investigate as the Kenyan parliament? What do Kenyans do? Do they recall all of them? What happens?
Of course, there is recall is one of the avenues presented by the Constitution. And I'm sure you know how difficult it is, that you can only do so after someone has served for more than 2 years. You can't recall before someone serves 2 years. You have to have almost half of those who voted in that constituency signing, and then the costs that then you have to pay, not any other, Kitili, Osido, and Wanjiro, and Kamau is going to do that. It's going to be very difficult. However, we have avenues that have been that are much more softer, and an organization like County Governance Watch, where I serve, have been more or less at the forefront to be able to set up some of these platforms. One of them is to deal with these issues at the county level. So we have what we call the Governors Roundtable that brings together more or less the entire county. The governor sits there, the speaker, the citizens, different leaders, faith-based and all that, to be able to have a candid reflection around their counties and to be able to have recommendations on what therefore needs to be done. The third thing is petitioning. Citizens need to go out there to be able to exercise their sovereignty that has been given to us by the Constitution through petitioning processes. A petition is really, because even if we went the Judicial Commission way, one of the things that the members of that commission will be asking the citizens is to present memoranda and petition. Yeah. So that they will be relying on a lot of this documentation to be able to provide either evidence or information on what the issues are. So the citizens therefore need to realize that really our power in exercising our sovereignty has been given to us to be able to do certain things like petitioning. But again, just walk into the government offices and ask for information. Our Constitution in Article 35 has given us the power to be able to access that information. And so let's use that information to be able to set the kind of pace that we want in terms of dealing with some of these issues, and also to use it for publishing. Let people know what is happening in our counties and also at the national level. Right. But I think the bottom line really relies on, I'll repeat, His Excellency the President. He needs to take care of his legacy. Let him learn from what other countries have been able to do. And I think Kenyans, ceteris paribus, the talk around the Building Bridges initiative, the Big Four, all these issues, if we do not have a softer landing and a safer ground for citizens to be able to accrue maximum benefit from many of these government programs because of corruption and some of the vices that we are talking about, then it will really not mean anything to many of us Kenyans.
Thank you. So bottom line, after all is said and done, parliamentary committee or judicial commission?
Parliamentary will not work. We've seen this happen in the past. Even the Judicial Commission, the much they can be able to do is to just make recommendations, which we have also seen.
The buck stops at the top.
Yeah.
All right. So Mr. Omolo?
Might not.
So at the end of the day, parliamentary committee or commission of inquiry?
I think of the two, I would go for commission of inquiry. But at the end of the day, when it does its work and submits its report, the buck will stop with the president. Does he have the guts to implement those findings? Because all is done at his discretion. So it is up to him to implement what is decided. But I think let's have a commission of inquiry and let's dig deeper into the entire sugar sector woes.
All right, thank you so much. So what is coming out is a commission of inquiry.